Hello, and welcome to Spare Change News TV. My name is Sam Baltrusis. I'm the editor-in-chief of Spare Change News. Joining me this afternoon is Cleve Ray. He was a guest before on our show, and we're welcoming him back because he has a great new initiative that he's announcing. It's in the early stages, but it's called the Homeless Inclusion Initiative. So, Cleve, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sam.
So, tell me about this idea. It's fantastic. When I immediately heard about it, I'm like, we need to have Cleve back on the show.
Thank you. Well, it's something that I just kind of thought up in the past several weeks about a way to help reduce the number of homeless people in the Metroplex and perhaps the Commonwealth. The idea involves creating a small community of citizens, incorporating a homeless person or homeless family, and coming together as a community, taking care of one another as a community, and then as a result, seeing the homeless person come out of the darkness of homelessness and into normal society.
So it's sort of like a mentorship program, and that I think that's definitely needed. There's so many levels of bureaucracy that the homeless face if they're newly homeless. So it's a fantastic idea. So to tell our viewers, I know that you've told your story before, but
Yes.
tell us your journey to this point.
Okay. Last year, 2014, was a very difficult year for me. I had problems with severe depression. I spent most of 2014 in psychiatric care, including 3 stays in the hospital. One for 17 days, the second for 37 days. When I left the hospital, I became homeless. I had no income and my savings was gone. Someone had suggested that the place to get all the services that I need would be Long Island in Boston. So I found myself in the Long Island shelter on October the 3rd. Well, the shelter closed on October the 8th, throwing chaos into the homeless community. After spending 2 nights with 150 people, men, on a loading dock in the South Boston waterfront, we were finally taken to the South End Fitness Center, which you've probably heard about. 225 men sleeping on cots on a basketball court in horrible conditions. But we had a place off of the streets to sleep. We had breakfast and supper provided, and that was about it. While I was on the island, I contacted a case manager there, and we talked for a little while, and he suggested that I talk with a social worker to kind of get the ball rolling on the things that I needed to accomplish. One of those things was to find myself in specialized psychiatric care. And the second thing was to initiate and get Social Security disability income so that I would have a source of income on which to live. The social worker pointed me to Boston Healthcare for the Homeless, which is at Boston Medical Center. There I had a therapist who was absolutely wonderful. I got a psychiatrist who immediately referred me to Mass General Hospital for the specialized care that I needed for my depression. I've been struggling with depression my entire life, and antidepressant medication hadn't worked for me. So I went into a program at Mass General Hospital called electroconvulsive therapy, or what we used to call shock treatment. I went inpatient for the first 2 weeks of treatment, which was 3 times a week. Then after the 2 weeks, I went back out to the shelter, but I continued outpatient care through my time of homelessness. And even now, I still go back to Mass General once every 4 weeks for further treatment. It's helped stabilize my depression, and it's made me, or put me in a place where I can conduct myself in a way that one would expect, and I feel good. I tell you this because there are many, many faces of homelessness. Most of the time, when we think of homelessness, we think of the men or women that we see sleeping on benches out in the public places and parks and things, or people with shopping carts loaded with possessions, or someone walking down the street talking to themselves who is obviously having problems with schizophrenia. But there are more faces of homelessness than that. Most of the people that I knew in the shelters where I stayed had mental health problems. Some of them were getting treated, some of them were not. I met many men who were working but had to stay in the shelter because they couldn't afford rent in the area where they worked. I met veterans. I met men who had come out of prison. I even had a friend who was 86 years old. 86 years old, and he was living in a homeless shelter. And he didn't seem to have any obvious mental incapacitations, so yeah, it was just a shock to me.
Well, Cleve is an example of the homeless population. Like there are a lot of misconceptions. There are a lot of things that I've encountered myself. That people generally something happens in their life. It could be severe depression. It could be an accident. It could be losing a job. All these things cause an event that causes them to become homeless. And then what do they do after? And your group, that it's early stages of this group, but your group would help them and act sort of as mentors to help them navigate through the system and hopefully give them hope that there is life after being homeless. Like there are places to go and things to do. So what if you had a mentor, had someone that was helping you throughout this process, say if you could mentor yourself, what would you tell yourself a year ago?
Oh, geez. A year ago, I had absolutely no idea. I was just so dependent upon mental health care providers that there was nothing that I felt like I could do to help myself except to continue to go to get that treatment. One of the things that I did encounter that really kind of brought this idea to the forefront, I believe, was I was on the radio on, I think it was WBUR, and one of my friends just happened to be listening to the radio, and he recognized my voice, and he listened to the story. And part of the story, I told that every morning I would go to a coffee shop on Mass Ave called Farmer Horse Coffee, and I would spend my mornings there. So one morning, out of the clear blue, he just shows up. I can't tell you how shocked I was. And he had a big smile on his face, and we shook hands, and he said, I heard you on the radio, and I wanted to come and see what I could do to help. He also said that there was this group of friends that we had when we worked together at Putnam Investments that also wanted to help. So I had this community of friends who I haven't seen in probably 9 years, who were coming together to see what they could do to help me as I went through this period of homelessness in my life that no one, including myself, ever thought that I would be in. So I had this little community that helped look after my welfare. My friend Dennis, who met me at the coffee shop, comes and picks me up when I go to Mass General for treatment because I have to go under anesthesia and all that. And he picks me up every time I'm there and takes me down the cafeteria. We sit and have coffee. We talk, get caught up on one another, and then when I'm strong enough, I leave and go home. So I think in there is where the idea came for the Boston Inclusion Initiative. Here I was, a homeless person, and here my friends were trying to help me and help pull me out in any way that they could from the dark place where I was at that time. So I think the idea of the Homeless Inclusion Initiative is just that, to find citizens who would like to help reduce homelessness. And the idea really is based on the fact that all of us Homo sapiens are social beings. That's what we're made to be. We interact with one another for the good of one another. And so I'm trying to take that idea of intrinsic community and create it, bringing in a homeless person, whether it be an individual or a family, and have this inclusion community look after one another and help the homeless person navigate their way out of the place where they find themselves. As you know, housing is a big problem for the homeless.
Absolutely.
In my experience, finding a subsidy takes a long time. And even after you have a subsidy, finding a place to use that subsidy takes an even longer time. I know people who were homeless for years, and some that still are, because they just haven't found a place where they could live, places that would take their subsidy. I've also known people who had a subsidy and had a place to live, but for no fault of their own, were evicted from the place where they were living, normally because the rent was raised and it was too high for them to be able to afford, or the landlord wanted to move out of being a housing subsidy person and into something more lucrative. So housing is the biggest issue that faces homeless people outside of mental health care.
Right, and that we actually talked our
healthcare in
latest
general.
issue. We talked about not the title of the issue was not affordable. So we have a lot of people who have jobs. They're low paying jobs, but they can't afford their housing. You also have people who had these major events happen in their lives and they don't have enough money to pay their rent. They lose their housing. Where do they go? So there's a lot of happening out there. There's a lot of misconceptions out there, and it's I think it's important for Spare Change News to sort of talk about those misconceptions. And Cleve is a perfect example of someone who became homeless and actually is doing something good and giving back to the community. So I think it's fantastic what you're doing.
Thank you.
I also find it kind of interesting. There's actually a movie with Richard Gere coming out in early September called Time Out of Mind. And he's actually, in this movie, he is a squatter. He gets kicked out of the place that he's staying at and becomes homeless. He goes into a shelter, and then at the shelter he has someone that he meets up with and becomes his mentor in the shelter. So we're going to play a trailer from this movie.
Are you and have you been addicted to any legal or illegal substances? How about family? You got family? Normally it's, parents takes care of the kid.
Sick of your head. You're not well. You don't like yourself. You're depressed. You don't believe in yourself. So what's the society supposed to do with you? Why should they care? Did you ever care for me? I've been feeling for the last 10 years, maybe, that I am
just one stupid loser of an idiot. And I'm just not so sure anymore. Am I homeless?
No, you just...
Am I homeless?
reduce me up, George. That's
I'm
what it
homeless.
is.
I don't exist. You don't exist.
So that's the new movie coming out in September with Richard Gere. I've heard mixed reviews about the movie. There's some like in the movie, obviously he has some issues with alcohol, which is not the reality. I mean, some people definitely deal with addiction issues.
Absolutely.
And so he may be one of those small percentage that actually deal with alcoholism or with addiction. But there's also a lot of denial too, like that he's like, I'm not homeless. But the thing that I found really was the relationship with the other character who became his mentor in the movie, and then also just sort of the idea of having the mentor and sort of making this mainstream. It's like talking about homelessness and the real issues that happen with the homeless population. I think it's definitely an important, it's an interesting movie. And so what do you, like with that, like what do you think as far as like pop culture representations of homelessness?
Oh Lord, I don't know. I'd have to see the movie to see how they present it. I've never, I don't think I've ever seen a production that actually did a good job of talking about homelessness. But then again, it's only been, was not quite a year ago for me when I first became homeless, and I've made all of these discoveries in the 7 months that I was. So my eyes have really been opened wide. I'll be interested to see the movie and see what my impressions are about how they managed it.
The one thing that I got from the end was feeling invisible.
Yes.
Like, is that something that you would? Because I've heard that from other people that like you don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're invisible.
Right.
Like, what are some of the feelings one has when they're in a shelter or on the streets that people may not know?
Well, my initial impression, at least for me, was one of outright terror. The Long Island shelter had 450 homeless people warehoused. There wasn't, the beds were bunk beds, double bunks. They were close together, organized in rows. I think there were 200 beds per room. There was one room on the first floor, one room on the second floor. I take it back. Third floor, second floor. First floor was for women and staff. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified. I'd never been a part of anything even remotely similar to that. Then during the day, we would get out of the shelter at 7 in the morning, 8 on weekends, and the day was just free. And what do you do with yourself? Mm-hmm. The first thing I did on the first day was to find my coffee shop, which I did, and to find a barber shop because I was in desperate need of a shave and a haircut. So I did that. I guess the second day I was in the shelter, someone realized that I was new, one of the shelter clients, and kind of took me under his wing because he knew I didn't know how to get around or what to do. And that was helpful. That kind of got me into a group of his friends. And everyone in that clique were out of prison, except for me. It was comforting to have people to be around, but I never would have thought in a million years that I would have been a part of a group of former prison inmates. We got along well, though. I had lunch with them pretty much every day. I got food stamps, but for a homeless person, with food stamps, you can't go to the grocery store and then go someplace and prepare yourself a meal.
Right.
So the only thing that I could do was buy prepackaged food.
Okay.
So this place where we hung out together, there was a 7-Eleven, and I would go there and I'd get a bowl of fruit and some almonds. Occasionally I'd get like a sub that was shrink wrapped. Occasionally we would have pizza together, but that was it. That was it.
See, like things like that, like food, like if you have food stamps and then you can't, because you're in a shelter, you can't cook the food. And like, what do? You go to a 7-Eleven and you get a hot dog or you get a sub or fruit in a bowl. And these are things that people don't think about. You know, like it's great that you qualify for food stamps, but what if you can't use the food stamps?
Exactly.
And this is also applicable to homeless families too. Homeless families are put into hotels. There's nowhere for them to cook food or make a nutritious meal for their kids.
Right.
So definitely an issue. And it would be great if we could somehow have a place where people, homeless population can go and could have that place where they could cook or, so maybe that's something with the homeless inclusion initiative, maybe there's some way you can like talk about those issues and maybe there could be a solution at some point.
Yes.
So what's next for homeless inclusion initiative? I know it's early stages. You're launching a Facebook page.
Right.
So tell me what's next for your idea.
Well, first thing is that we did start this Facebook page just today, the Homeless Inclusion Initiative. You can find it on Facebook. And what I'm hoping is that after you've listened to our discussion about the initiative, that you'll go out to that Facebook page and post your thoughts and your feelings about what you've heard and how it affected you, and whether this kind of thing would be something that you would like to get involved in. Just post. This is the first time that the idea has come out publicly, and we would like to get a sense of what you think. This interview will be posted, I believe, tomorrow, so you can ask your friends to take a look at it on Facebook and also post their thoughts and feelings about what they heard and what they think. That will give us an idea of what the idea sounds like to you, and we'll know what to do next.
So I love that. So this is your chance to give input and to help the homeless community by coming up with ideas and kind of giving feedback. So I highly recommend. Cleve has been someone that's been on the show before and someone that's been an advocate for those who don't have a voice. As Cleve has stepped up, and that's a tough role to be in. To someone that he was the voice of those who were displaced from Long Island. And you've done a fantastic job representing the community while also taking care of yourself, which I'm sure it's difficult to do that and then also be the voice of the community.
Yes.
But Cleve has stepped up, and things happen for reasons, and I
Yes.
think that you were put in this position to help other people.
I believe that.
And so I think that this is the next phase in Cleve's journey with the Homeless Inclusion Initiative, and help him make it a reality. It's a great idea. It's a needed idea. And again, they go to Facebook, type in a Homeless Inclusion Initiative, and find the page, like the page. We're going to have an article on Cleve's probably in the next couple of weeks in Spare Change. So not the upcoming issue, but the issue after. And then we'll also post the link on our Facebook page as well, and then with the video, and then also post it on our website too.
Excellent.
So anything, we have a few minutes left. Anything else, clearly, you would want to talk about? We're coming up on the anniversary of the closing of the Long Island Bridge.
Yes. I'm a member of the Boston Homeless Solidarity Committee, a grassroots organization that sprung up because of the closing of Long Island last October. We meet every Sunday in Boston at 10 Hamilton Place, which is across the street from the Park Street Church and in front of the Orpheum. That organization, Boston Homeless Solidarity Committee, is working on a day-long event in Boston to recognize the 1-year anniversary of the closing of Long Island. We're going to have a small parade. We're going to have a rally at City Hall. We're going to have a rally at the State House. And then we're going to have lunch, and a catered lunch, and some workshops for the homeless to help them understand what kind of rights they have as a homeless person that they may not currently be aware of. So that's our big push for the anniversary of the closing of Long Island.
So it's going to be on the actual date.
It is.
So October 8th.
Yeah, I think it's a Thursday.
Thursday.
Yeah.
So guys, this is like the closing of the bridge had such a huge ripple effect on the community. Support this project. Remember, this cannot happen again.
Right.
So many people were displaced. Hundreds of people were displaced. It still has a ripple effect. So of course. The mayor of Boston has stepped up to a certain degree, and some shelters have opened, but we don't know the ramifications of what happened with Long Island. Still, people are dying from heroin overdoses. There's a lot of things that happen because of that, and we can't forget it, and we cannot repeat again what happened on Long Island. So the only way to do that is to remember.